President Biden, everybody, is now being urged to take executive action this week to help the American people financially. This executive order could be signed this week by the president, but lawmakers have opposed a few changes to it. And the good news is that the General Assembly announced that a bill has been filed to provide $300 in direct payments to Delaware taxpayers to help with the rising cost of gas and other necessities. Under the plan, which has the support of Governor John Carney, a $300 direct payment will go to every resident who filed a 2020 tax. According to lawmakers, this is the first time Delaware has ever done a rebate program, since the state has an unprecedented $1 billion surplus. Lawmakers said they saw a rebate program as the best way to provide quick relief to people in Delaware experiencing any financial strain. The payments will go to anyone who filed a tax return in 2020, which is an estimated 600,000 residents. And there are some residents who did not file a tax return, especially seniors and low-income residents. Language in the bill filed this week says that all adult residents, even those who did not file a 2020 tax return, will receive the $300. The $300 will not be subject to Delaware income taxes. The rebate is for every individual tax filer, regardless of filing married, jointly, or separately. So a married couple would get $600. For months, Delaware lawmakers expected to have a whopping $800 million in extra revenue for this fiscal year. The Delaware Economic and Financial Advisory Council recently projected that there will be an additional $260 million in revenue for this fiscal year, resulting in a surplus of $1 billion. Lawmakers said they expect to vote on the measure next month. It's expected to sail through the General Assembly quickly because it is backed by Democratic and Republican leadership. Representative Valerie Longhurst, the state's House Majority Leader, said the hope for residents to receive the money before June 30th. So this is nice news for Delaware residents. And also, people in Maine can now check the status of their $850 relief payments using a new website from the Maine Revenue Services. The checks, which will be paid for with $730 million from an estate surplus, were approved by the Maine legislature this past season as a one-time payment to help with the rising cost of inflation. The Department of Administrative and Financial Services says it mailed initial $5,000 relief checks via the U.S. Postal Service. Those are expected to arrive in mailboxes as early as this week. The department will then issue around 200,000 checks per week after that, with the vast majority of qualifying Mainers who have already filed their 2021 Maine tax return expected to receive their check by mid-July. Eligible Mainers should expect to see their checks arrive this week, and the state says it will be based on when your 2021 tax return was received. And while the tax deadline has passed, it's not too late to file a return. Mainers have until October 31st. The relief payments are also available to retirees and to those who receive Social Security and SSI, so long as they meet the eligibility criteria. With widespread student loan forgiveness has not yet become a reality, some U.S. borrowers have already received some debt relief. Roughly 1.3 million borrowers have seen $25 billion in student debt forgiveness.
Now, as the gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Jayapal, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was very instructive, that last 5 minutes. Let me just take on several points. The other side is money out too. Let's be really clear. That's the $2 trillion tax cut that Donald Trump passed with Republican votes. And that is a tax cut that went to the top 10% of the country. And that's if you're generous, it went to the top 10%. So don't tell me that you don't like to give out free money, because you're giving it out all the time. Let's look at, if you want to look at a debacle, how about the debacle of what's happening right now with oil and gas companies profiteering and the profits of these corporations going up massively, even as working people across this country cannot afford their gas at the pump. This is profiteering, and it's not just by those oil companies. Look at the food companies, look at the agriculture companies. You are seeing people profiteering right now, and those are the people that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to help. The difference here—
Awesome news, everybody. More and more state governments have proposed new stimulus relief. Also, new changes have been made, and so now Social Security, SSI, and SSDI beneficiaries are eligible for received boosted relief benefits. And now here's an update on the latest stimulus proposals. California state lawmakers approved a $300 billion budget this week, but several key sticking points remain between California Governor Gavin Newsom and the lawmakers, which could drag out negotiations on a final spending plan. Under the California law, the governor must sign the spending plan by June 30th, in time for the state's new fiscal year to begin on July 1st. Often many budget details are worked out and approved in the weeks following those constitutional deadlines, which are referred to as budget trailer bills. That appears to be the case once again this year, as top lawmakers and Governor Newsom continue to negotiate over exactly how to spend a historic $98 billion surplus. The budget approved by the legislature early this week includes a record amount of money for public schools and higher education, as well as a total of $40 billion for budgetary reserves. That is nearly the amount in savings before the crisis in 2019. It also includes the $40 billion for infrastructure, projects, and funding to make Medi-Cal available for every low-income resident. Despite the budget's large size, there are still many lawmakers and the governor to work out. Republican Assembly member Vince Fong said the approved budget fails to address critical crises facing their state. Fong, who is a top Republican on the Assembly Budget Committee, criticized Democrats for passing an incomplete spending plan to meet their deadline and planning to fill in the gaps later. Other resolved issues include rebates to address skyrocketing gas prices and inflation, as well as reimbursement rate increases for state-sponsored childcare, providers, and disability insurance. Another sticking point between top lawmakers and Newsom is the size and eligibility for a tax relief package aimed at helping Californians cope with inflation and record-high gas prices. Newsom proposed sending $400 per vehicle up to $800 to car owners to offset the rising cost of fuel. Leaders in the Assembly and State Senate have insisted on targeting tax relief to lower-income residents who spend a higher percentage of their income on necessities like housing and transportation and are hit hard by inflation. Lawmakers unveiled their own plan to send $200 per person, with an additional $200 per dependent for individuals earning up to $125,000 for families. And in a statement after the legislature's budget was passed, Newsom's office said the governor would like to see more immediate relief to help millions of more Americans with rising gas prices and rent prices and grocery price increases. They were also noting Newsom's plan would spend about $3.5 billion more on tax relief. Meanwhile, Republicans continue to call Newsom and Democrats who control the legislature to suspend the state's gas tax, which is set to increase 50 cents per gallon to 54 on July 1st. Republican state lawmakers argue suspending the gas tax will provide near immediate relief to those impacted by high gas prices. Democrats have refused to cut the gas, citing the funding it provides for infrastructure projects. They also say there's no way to guarantee oil companies and gas stations will not keep prices high and pocket the difference.
Before. That being said, Courtney, I understand today's meeting was pretty conciliatory, pretty workmanlike. They tried to dial down the tensions. The one thing that emerged, though, that ought to be a concern, I think, for anybody thinking about oil prices longer term, is whether the administration is thinking of restricting the export of petroleum products like gasoline and diesel. That would be an authentic mistake. And I understood that came up in the meeting, and some folks left that thinking that could be really on the table.
Let me ask a couple of questions here, because there's all this talk about, as you said, Court, profit margins are not acceptable. I'm not sure whose profit margins the president is talking about. Is he talking about the big refiners, the exploration and production companies? Is he talking about the retailers? What are the profit margins?